Welcome back to the Call to Create podcast here at Open Space Event Studios in Bend, Oregon. Today I get to sit down and talk with Dr. Rebecca L. Johnson, the Vice President of Oregon State University Cascades. So, Becky Johnson, OSU Cascades Vice President, sitting here with me today. We are way underqualified to have this conversation with a woman of this distinction, but here we are. We somehow managed to Shanghai you in to sit down with me today, and I really appreciate it. So thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Okay, so we were just talking about this, and so let me make sure I understand. So for Oregon State University, there is the president of the university in Corvallis, the main campus of OSU. You are the vice president of the OSU-Cascades campus, but you're kind of like, for OSU-Cascades, you're top of the heap. Is that how that works out?
Yeah, that's right, and it does get awkward because people think there's somebody above me, right, at OSU-Cascades, right. And it's just the way the bureaucracy works in academia. In some places, I'd be called a chancellor, and there would be a president, but we don't do that at OSU.
And is there a distinction between a chancellor and a vice president, or are they kind of the same?
They would be the same thing in this case, right?
Okay, so the chancellor or the vice president, like you are the head executive of OSU-Cascades.
That's right. Had a number of different titles over the years: chief academic officer, CEO. They've tried dean. They've tried lots of things, and now we're vice president.
Right. Like leader extraordinaire, maybe.
No, that wasn't one of them.
And so you have now been with OSU-Cascades since this plan started. Is that right?
No, OSU-Cascades actually started in 2001.
Oh.
And it was sitting up on the COCC campus. And so we had leased a building there that was called Cascades Hall. They actually built it for us to occupy.
Okay.
And that started in 2001. I think there were about 250 students here at the time, and those students were in a hodgepodge of different programs trying to finish their 4-year degree in Central Oregon because they were place-bound. And now we have about 1,300 students. And in 2014, we got permission to offer freshman, sophomore classes. Before that, we were just junior and senior, so students started at COCC and then they transferred to OSU-Cascades. Okay. So we got permission.
The capstone program?
Yeah.
Is that what that means? That they start their degree at the community college and finish their degree at OSU-Cascades. Okay.
Which is really good for some students, and we still have that option. In fact, the majority of our students still transfer into OSU-Cascades rather than starting there as freshmen.
Okay.
But it wasn't what everybody thought of when they thought we want a 4-year university here in Central Oregon.
Right.
And so we got permission finally from the state board, and they said, yeah, you can become a 4-year university. And then it's like, well, where will we go? Where will we be located? And we thought about trying to stay on the community college campus, but as we grew and as they grew, that seemed problematic. And so we ended up having our own place. In 2015, I think we moved to our own campus.
Okay, is that when you?
I came in 2009.
2009. Okay, so you were there for that transition from COCC to your own campus.
Right.
Now, where you guys stand right now, you have a 10-acre campus on the west side of Bend, and you have about, you said 1,100 students?
1,300.
1,300 students. What you're expanding into is how big is the campus going to be when it's
total of about 125 acres.
And I'm sure that has gone smoothly, no problems, just breezed right through. Yeah.
Well, the 10 acres wasn't too bad, other than we had some opposition from neighbors that weren't very happy about having a university in there close to their neighborhood. So that was a challenge for sure. But the challenge we really have to expand beyond the 10 acres is we bought a 45-acre pumice mine and a 75-acre demolition landfill.
Those are two separate things.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad you clarified that, because that was going to be a question of mine. And so from what I've seen, and I live over on that side of town, so I drive by there now. it's amazing the amount of excavation that has had to happen to,
Yeah.
I guess, get down to like native soil, right?
Yeah.
You have to get to where it's stable, and now you can actually build things on top of it.
Yeah. So it was, we're actually up a little bit from where it used to be. It was an active pumice mine. We had a mining permit when we bought it, so we could have mined some more. But yeah, they did have
University
to actually.
or pumice.
Yeah,
mine.
right. Or garbage,
Right, yeah.
landfill supervisor. We did have to dig out a little bit of stuff that had been thrown in there to get down to the native soil, but we've added a lot. So we took those slopes and we pulled a lot of material off the slopes.
Okay.
And then that allowed us to build up. So the new building that you see there right now is only 1 story below the 10-acre campus.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, but then of course it keeps going down
Right.
from there.
Okay. I want to back up and ask a question. You had said something about the state board
Yeah.
of education or something. The state board gave you permission to pursue a second campus. Is that so? Does the actual state of Oregon decide if you can build another campus or not?
Yeah, well, they don't exist anymore. So
I've outlived them.
there used to be an Oregon State Board of Higher Education that oversaw all 7 universities, and they had this kind of authority. And now each university has their own independent boards. And so at this point, we would not have had to ask the state for that permission, but at the time it was required. And you know how fast Bend has been growing. Even in 2009, when we were in the depth of the recession, it was still a growing, attractive community that has never had a 4-year university.
Right.
And so there was a lot of momentum here locally to get one.
Right. It kind of short circuits my brain a little bit to think that you have to ask the State Board of Higher Education for permission to build another campus. I would think it's like if you as a university decide, is that just because you're a state university, or is that just kind of for any private university, anything?
Yeah, it's just because we're a public university, yeah.
Still.
Yeah, the privates can do what they like, and I'm surprised there's not a private university in Central Oregon, given the growth here and the vibrancy, and I'm sure at some point one will move in.
Right. Now that you guys have
now that we've set the table,
you've opened the door.
Yeah, there's a lot of regulations around universities in general. Another area is what degrees we're allowed to offer. That has to go through a state kind of approval process where all of the other universities get to weigh in about whether they think it's okay for us to offer, say, engineering. And
Really?
there is a lot of competition among universities, and because we are in this fast-growing area, we are seen maybe as competition to especially Western Oregon, Eastern Oregon, Southern Oregon, and they think if we weren't here, all of these Central Oregon students would go to one of their universities. And,
One of those
yeah,
other schools.
and unfortunately they're in regions that aren't growing like Central Oregon is, so their enrollment has been declining and ours has been growing. So when we say, can we have a new degree program, the answer is often no.
Right.
So
yeah, so much for competition. They don't want you
yes.
competing with them in the same programs.
Right.
Okay. And so since 2009, and if you would take us a little before 2009, where you were already a professor at OSU, correct?
Yeah, I started as a professor in 1984, so that's how old I am. But I came right out of grad school and I've been here ever since. I just love Oregon State University. I got a job, I'm an economist, but I got a job in the College of Forestry. I'm a natural resource economist. And the College of Forestry is probably one of the best, if not the best in the country. And so once you're in the College of Forestry at Oregon State University, there's really kind of no reason to think about going anywhere else.
Oh, I gotcha.
And you think about the west side of Oregon and the kinds of forests we have, it's an amazing place. And so I did that for 20 years, and then I became the associate dean in the College of Forestry for 5 years. And then I became the vice provost for academic affairs and international programs at the whole university. So that's where I was in 2009 when we had fired the head of the campus over here, and they needed somebody to come over on an interim basis while they searched for a permanent, and nobody wanted to come because it wasn't doing that well. And,
Right.
And my boss couldn't find anybody, and I finally said, okay, I'll go, but I'm coming back to Corvallis. I'll do it for 2 or 3 months, but I'm coming back. And
Right.
I came over here, and they were talking about possibly closing the campus at that time because it was struggling. And the state, again, this was 2009, it was, recession and
Right.
trouble. And so the Ways and Means Committee, which is the budget writing, committee for the state, went around the state doing public meetings, and they came to Bend, and we had like 600 people show up saying, you can't cut OSU-Cascades. And I was like, whoa, this is kind of cool because, in Corvallis, we're just taken for granted, right? You wouldn't get 600 people to come out to be in support of the university. It's more like, why are you have people parking in my neighborhood and things like that. So I was really impressed by that and ended up deciding I wanted to stay, and I've been here ever since.
That was going to be one of my questions for you, because I saw in your bio that you had just agreed to come here on a temporary basis, and that something changed your mind along the way, and it was just the support of the community for it.
Because you wouldn't have thought the community was supportive. The newspaper had some negative editorials about the university, and so I was really shocked that people. But it's it's human nature, right? It threatened to take something away from people, even if they hadn't really been paying attention that much to it. Then it's like, well, wait a minute, we really want a university here.
Right. And is it also there has to be a huge attraction for you that you're creating something whole, almost out of, literally out of raw land, like you're taking something that didn't exist before.
Yeah. And it's not just the physical campus, it's the whole university, right? I mean, very few people get the opportunity that I've had to come into a university. And again, it was 8 years old at the time, but really we had 7 or 8 degrees, and we probably have 20 now. So this whole idea of what do we want to be, what degree should we offer, most universities, we never talked about that for the 20 years I was in Corvallis, right? You had the degrees you had. And,
that was set.
Yeah. And so you certainly paid attention to how your industry might be changing and changing your curriculum, but you weren't thinking about a blank slate and saying, what does Central Oregon need? What do the students here need? What do the businesses need? What does the community need? So that was fun.
And when you first came here, were you still teaching, or were you just running the show, managing the transition to your own campus, all that stuff?
Yeah, and I really hadn't been teaching in the 5 years that I was there, because I was doing kind of this upper administrative kind of things.
But your background is as an economist.
So why am I here in a creative show, right?
Well, no, I mean, to me, creativity expresses itself in whatever field you are drawn to. I mean, I think back to my family's accountant was one of the most creative people I knew.
Really?
Because he was passionate about that field and could, I don't know how to make a verb out of account. He could do accounting in rings around anyone else. So I feel like creativity expresses itself in whatever you're passionate about.
Yeah.
And so was that as an economist, I would think you would find it really fascinating to get to build this sort of new sort of beating heart of the economy of Central Oregon.
There is a perspective that economists bring to any issue, any problem, which is logic and supply and demand, right?
Right.
And so I think it is an asset that the president that just retired from OSU was an economist. And I think in general, there's a good path to leadership, to thinking logically and thinking about analyzing any kind of a problem about supply and demand. It's like, what's needed here? How can we make it happen?
Yeah. And so now that the new campus is underway, sounds like you're still developing, trying to figure out what degree programs to offer.
Absolutely,
and that kind of thing. Is it getting easier? Is it getting harder?
I'll have to admit that the more successful we are, the harder it is because there's more resistance.
Right.
And that can even happen from our colleagues in Corvallis,
right.
Because everybody's competing for the same students these days. And I don't know if you know, the demographics of the United States are that we're at a little bit of a plateau in terms of high school graduates and coming into colleges. So every college around the country is scrambling to try to keep their enrollments up. And so Oregon is seen as a state that's growing. So you'll find universities from all over the country now are like, which states are growing, which ones aren't? Let's go steal their students.
Oh, okay.
And offer them, scholarships and offer them things, incentives to try to get them to come.
And the latest I was reading in the paper, it was pretty recently, that there was a push to try to basically make OSU-Cascades not OSU
make us
OSU
less
anymore.
compelling, right? That was introduced by the representative that lives in Monmouth, and so of course he's associated with Western Oregon University, and as I said, they've had some declining enrollments. And he felt like our association with OSU, which is a very great brand, right? It's a research-one university, a very research-intensive university. It's large, it's well known, was giving us too much of an advantage over the regional universities, and he felt that we should be a regional university just like Western, Eastern, and Southern. So let's change our name to Central Oregon University, take away our ability to offer doctorate programs, and put us kind of on the same playing field as they're on. And of course, that's not what anybody in Central Oregon wants. That association with a great land-grant university is a real asset for all of us. And so anyway, I wish that the conversation would be, how can we help Western Oregon and Eastern and Southern grow?
Right.
And not, how do we hamper the university that is growing?
Right. And this is almost an aside, but what does it mean if something is a land-grant university? How does it?
Well, it goes back to the Morrill Act during Lincoln's tenure, and at the time it was called the People's University.
Okay.
And it was originally, higher education was just for the elites. And so this idea was, we need to have public universities. And in particular, I think they were focused on agriculture, engineering, and military science in the very beginning. And so a lot of land grants still have a large ag component. We have ROTC at OSU. We have a program here at OSU-Cascades as well. So there still is a military preparation aspect to them. But they also have outreach, and so extension. I don't know if you're familiar with extension, but you probably know what 4-H is.
Right. Yeah.
That's part of extension, Master Gardener. But we have an office in every county in Oregon. Oregon State University does.
Oh.
And it's the way that we reach out to the entire state. That's what a land grant does, responsible for the entire state, and try to address whatever those needs. And it used to all be agriculture and home economics and things, but now it's engineering, it's forestry, it's lots of different things.
Okay. That was just, I've heard those terms before, and I never really...
Yeah, they often talk the three-legged stool, so it's education, and it's research, and it's outreach. That's kind of the idea of a land grant.
Gotcha. And you have now been in academia and doing this basically your entire career.
Right.
Is this, I mean, I have to think that creating a university campus whole cloth has to be, you just have to kind of think like this is your legacy, is it not? Is that how
Yeah, well,
to you?
I'm very proud of what we've done, but believe me, it doesn't happen with just me.
Right.
And
right.
it has been, and we couldn't do it without the community, for sure. And that goes for this things like showing up in Salem and lobbying for the money that we need to do it, but helping us decide which degree programs we want. I'm on the board of EDCO, which is Economic Development for Central Oregon. And when I first got here, they were like, we need engineering degrees. We have to have engineering degrees because we're getting these software firms coming in, we're getting manufacturing here. And that was my job. I got to figure out how we can get some engineering degrees over here in Central Oregon. So I've always got my ear to the ground about what's needed in terms of degrees. But then those people tend to step up as well. And so Ben Broadband put some money in for us to start an energy systems engineering degree. Hydroflask put some money in so we could start a degree in outdoor products. The Oxford Suites put some money in so we could have a hospitality management degree. I mean, the community has just been really instrumental in helping us grow. And then the physical campus requires donor money to be able to match the state grants. And so for Tyson Hall, we had to raise $4 million. For the Ray Hall that we're building right now, we had to raise $10 million. Wow. So those aren't small numbers for a small university like we are. And we don't have alums. Most universities get their donations from people who went there 50 years ago and feel like they want to give back. But we don't have anybody that went here 50 years ago.
Yeah, I don't have that. Gotcha. And so we are now, where we are physically as we're recording the show, sitting in what is now called the Central District in Bend, still it's kind of light industrial focused part of town the city is trying to switch over from light industrial to sort of pedestrian friendly live work spaces and restaurants and retail and that kind of thing. You guys on the west side, that was it was well developed already residentially on the west side, but like you said, you took over a pumice mine and a construction waste dump site or something like that. Right. It seems that what you're up to is transforming a space that was underutilized, unutilized. The city's trying to do a similar thing here on the east side, trying to transform the utilization of the space to something that is more useful to the community at this point. I mean, that's not fair perhaps to the industry that happens here. But I think there are other spaces in the city that serve that need better. At least that's the way the city views it.
Yeah.
How much of that has been an uphill battle? How much of that has been a process that was helped by the city? What has that been like for you guys over there on the west side? Yeah,
we looked at lots of different sites, and I was very fortunate to have 4 or 5 people really knowledgeable about real estate here in Central Oregon that got on a little committee with me. And we looked at Redmond, obviously looked at Juniper Ridge, looked at the Stevens Tract out on the east side of town. We looked at lots of different places where we could do that. And we first were thinking about repurposing buildings that were in the Mill Point area, which is kind of Columbia, Colorado, for the same kind of thing. It's like, and again, this was 2010, 11, 12 when we started looking, and commercial real estate was cheap.
Yeah,
right.
Especially after the 08 or 09 collapse.
So you're looking at a lot of buildings there that have a lot of vacancy, and it's like, wouldn't it be cool to repurpose these into a university where we're really in and amongst private sector buildings? Right. Well, unfortunately, the real estate market recovered, and we couldn't afford to do that anymore. Never mind, we'll go look somewhere else. Right, and we did look at Juniper Ridge, and lots of people, of course, wanted us to do that because that was the original master plan for Juniper Ridge. Because if I remember correctly, Juniper Ridge, it's owned by the city, right? And they intended it, or still intend for it to be a huge commercial development. Right. It's kind of on the eastern edge of town. Northeast, yeah. And they've seen, Mm-hmm.
than I think the Les Schwab
Yeah, and
headquarters,
Cetera's there.
there's kind of not much out there.
Right.
Is that right?
That's right, and they're putting in a sewer interceptor now. But at the time, we were looking. There was no sewer interceptor, and there was the issue of the Cooley Road interchange. So the traffic and the sewer issues had been there from the beginning. And basically, what I was told was we would have to pay for a new interchange, and we would have to put up the money up front for the sewer improvement before we could even get started, and the land wasn't going to be free anyway. We had to buy the land as well, and it's
Right.
like, and so as you can see, we're in 2021 now. There's still no interchange, and they're just now, working on the sewer. So we would have been still up at COCC, I guess, trying
Right.
to figure out how are we going to build a building up there, and
Right.
so anyway, I know a lot of people wanted to have the university be on the edge of town somewhere, but
Right.
that wasn't my vision at all. I think students want to be in the mix the same way you're here in the Central District. People want to be in a vibrant area where there's retail and there's restaurants and,
Right.
and bars. They're students after all, right? Really easy access to Mount Bachelor and hiking trails and biking trails. That's what young people want to do.
Yeah.
And of course, that's what everybody in Bend wants to do, right? And
That's why we're all here, right?
Yeah. And so our site won't hold probably more than 5,000 students. And at the time, so we had to master plan it for 5,000, and that number, I think, scared people. Oh my God, 5,000 students. Well, it's been 5 years and we have 1,300. It just doesn't happen all at once,
It's
right?
not like 5,000
Yeah.
people show up
Right.
one day.
Right. And so I think the opposition has certainly settled down, and I think people have seen that this is going to be a long process, that you'll have time to get used to it. I think people like what we're doing with the campus, and as that pumice mine gets developed, all that's going to be open for people to
Right.
come in and walk their dog or take a hike, whatever they want to do.
And I've watching this process go on since I moved here 7.5 years ago. I always thought, who else, what other entity could ever come along and put that land to use? First of all, do all the remediation you have to do to undo the environmental, whatever, and I don't know how much environmental damage that stuff created, but it couldn't have been great.
Right.
Who else is going to have the resources and the will and all of that to make something like that, to turn that around and make it into usable land?
And that's the advantage of us being a public university. If we were a private university, we'd have to figure out, how to raise that. And of course, private universities' tuition is usually about 4 times what ours is. And so that does give them more resources than we have, but we're a public university, and so the state does support a lot of the capital needs. So when we need a new building, we can get on the list of priorities. Right now, we're on the list in this legislative session for our next building will be called a Student Success Center, and it will be all of the things that students need outside of the classroom. So we think about advising and mental health counseling, physical health counseling, veteran services, disability access services, career services. There's about 20 different things that we have to provide. Well, we want to provide students, to help them be successful. And so right now, those are kind of crammed into our academic building. And as we grow, there's just not space. So we did get that building into the governor's recommended budget in December, which was a really big step for us, because if you're not in the governor's budget, it's just an uphill battle to try to get into the final budget bill at the end of the session. So we're going to be doing a lot of lobbying over there from now till June to try to keep that building in the budget.
One thing you mentioned, I'm curious about, as a public university, is there, it sounds like offering veteran services is a specific drive or mission that you guys have?
Yeah, and mostly just because they are a unique population. Most of those students are coming back after serving in the military. Some of them are active military now. But they've had experiences that are different than other students. Some of them are on veterans benefits, and we try to help them figure out how they can get the best benefits that they're due in terms of tuition assistance, and but just having support services so that they all know each other. They feel like they have a group that's there that's has their back
and has like similar background,
yes,
similar
experiences, right? Yeah, and that's not unlike all the ethnic groups, and that also want to have a place and a group that understands their experiences and can relate when they're having issues or challenges. So our problem with all of those is never having space for all those groups. And the veterans came and asked if they could have the space under the stairs in our building. And it's just, we're talking just a little tiny place under the stairs.
Right.
And even that is like, well, if we give that to the veterans, then we're going to have 5 other groups that are going to want us to have space. So the Student Success Center will allow us to make space for all those affinity groups.
Gotcha. Okay. Wow, it's all part of, I guess, juggling where it's like spinning plates. It's like juggling chainsaws, maybe.
Yeah.
It's a better visual. But trying to keep all of that equally available to all the different groups. I can imagine that's.
And you can imagine right now it's a really tough time for a lot of people. We have the trial going on with the George Floyd incident. There's been the shootings in Georgia and Colorado, and I think it's really, and then of course the whole pandemic, right? And so people
we all need support from that, I think.
So our students have basically been learning remote for a year now. And
do you guys have a plan? I'm sure you have a plan, but do you have like a clear idea of when things are probably going to return to normal? Is like the fall semester going to be when you guys come back to in-person instruction?
Yeah, that's our plan, is fully in-person for fall. And what we don't know is, will we still have to do a little bit of distancing? We're pretty sure we'll probably have to require face coverings in classrooms. And so the face coverings are about how long you're in close proximity to someone. So if you're sitting in a class for 50 minutes, there's a pretty good chance you're going to be breathing somebody else's air. Right. And so unless things really get better with COVID by fall, we'll probably be having face coverings in the classrooms. But if we don't have to be 6 feet apart, that allows us to have enough classrooms that everybody can come back.
Right. Yeah, because I think even the public school, the elementary, middle, high school systems, they're all going down to 3 feet at this point, right? So,
Yep.
And that would let you guys do your thing.
Yeah, and of course we have the new building that's going to be opening in the fall too, so that will give us a lot more space.
So kind of getting back to these sort of parallel redevelopment projects of like the Central District and what you guys are doing on the west side, are you guys part of or giving input, or because you're a university, you have economists and planners and engineering, and is there a sort of crossover or input being sought from the university as to how this is being redeveloped? Or
I think the main place where we are probably collaborating is on transportation alternatives, and we really see the need for corridors that go east-west. In Bend and
on bikes and stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
and what do we want to do about transit? People probably aren't going to get on big buses and all go to. We're not big enough as a city that we can fill up a bus with like people that are all going to the same place. And so, what's the innovative future on transportation? Whether it's Uber or whether it's scooters or whatever. But we clearly need to have safe corridors for people who want to do something other than be in their car. And we really don't have that in Bend at this time, especially east-west. So I know we're involved in a lot of conversations with the city and other groups about transportation, the future of transportation in Bend. And then I think we just have common interests in what you might just call smart cities. How do you lay out a city or parts of a city in a way that's efficient from an energy perspective, and these transportation alternatives, and people being able to live and work in the same area, walkable communities. So
Right.
we certainly have common interests in that
Right,
as well.
and that is 100% what they're trying to do with this part of town. And,
Right.
you know, I think that we will get there eventually.
Yeah.
Almost in spite of itself, the city will get there.
Yeah.
Um,
What do you think the time frame will be?
I mean, they just passed that, or they pushed for that huge bond, I think, to redevelop this over like a 30-year time frame. And I was kind of like, surely this is going to happen faster than 30 years. I would hope that in a 10-year time frame, this whole area of town will be unrecognizable from what it is right now.
I think a lot of that's going to depend on how growth keeps happening, right?
Right. Yeah, the patterns of growth, but also how resistant the city mechanism is to people trying to make those changes happen.
And I feel like the city is totally invested in the central district, right? They talk about it all the time. This should be a top priority for them. And I know that whenever they want to change a land use rule, there's process you have to go through. And I'm sure that's part of what's making this difficult and lengthy. But the goal is, I think the city's talking about maybe even having City Hall in the Bend Central District.
I hadn't heard that before.
And if that happened, could that be the anchor, right? And then helps develop other people. And that's the way the university was seen in terms of Juniper Ridge, right? We could be the anchor. If we were in Juniper Ridge, it would be more attractive for other people then to come in and develop around the university.
I mean, just speaking from my experience in the process of redeveloping this property, there doesn't need to be such a massive move by the city to like create an anchor or to create if my opinion is, if the city would just make it easier, faster, less expensive for the current property owners to redevelop, it'll happen quickly.
Yeah.
And I mean, they can do things like improve access from downtown and make it easier to get over here, that kind of stuff. That only the city and, I guess the state DOT can take care of that stuff. But other than that, if you just kind of make it easier for property owners to make those changes that they want to see happen, it'll happen.
Yeah, and I think that was the plan. The plan was that if the city would do what cities are good at, which is infrastructure and the rules, private sector will take care of itself, right? If you make it attractive to build here and make it easy, then the city doesn't have to invest in the actual development of the area.
Right. Or at least make it not so prohibitively lengthy and expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, I am all for, we put a lot of money and effort and time into like ADA access and making sure fire safety is right. Like, I'm all for that.
Right.
But, when we have to go back and forth on relatively insignificant details that eat up weeks of time and email and traffic and meetings and a lot of money in consulting with architects and stuff, it's like, if you just take away those pain points, things will happen so fast here.
Well, we're currently building a roundabout on the corner of Colorado and Columbia that we're paying for. So this is an example of how new development has to, there's a negotiation about your SDCs and what you're going to have to pay for. And, we do have a building there on the corner of Colorado and Columbia, but it's small. But these are the agreements. And the city has to figure out how they're going to pay for things like new roundabouts, and pretty much the only place they can look is new development. And so it is expensive. It is time consuming.
Sure.
And I guess I have to look at it a little bit from from the city's perspective as
Yeah.
well, is where do they get the money, right?
Well, and I've had conversations with engineers that work with the city frequently about, I try not to get on my soapbox too much about the issues of redevelopment here, but they've pointed out that a lot of what where the city's attitude comes from is in dealing with developers that are trying to cut corners and not to drop that at the feet of all developers, but I'm sure there are some who, try to get away with whatever they can get away with. And I'm like, yeah, I can see where that's a problem. But for someone, I have tried to do this in a way, we have tried to be completely above board about everything, show them exactly every step of the process of what we're doing. And it actually caused a lot of problems and costs and time.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, if you make it hard for people to do it legally, they're gonna try to do it. They're gonna try to get around the rules. Yeah. So
it's very expensive right now to do any kind of construction, and I don't know if you hit that peak or not. But I mean, hiring an electrician, hiring a plumber,
material expenses,
right, and then you add SDCs to that, and it's just really expensive and land costs. It's just very expensive to build in Bend right now.
So what is it you see? Like, what do you see as the main role? Not the main role. What are the roles that OSU-Cascades can play as we're like redeveloping this part of town or in any other economic developmental part of Bend? Like, what's that role for OSU-Cascades? Because it's not just to be a school. It's to be like there's a lot more to it. Right?
Yeah. No, we try to be super collaborative with our community, and that extends to all of Central Oregon. It's hard, of course. Prineville's a long way away, and Madras is a long ways away, but we're here to serve. And the first thing, of course, is access to higher education. That's our primary reason for being in Central Oregon. We are the closest university. The Corvallis campus is the closest university to Central Oregon if we weren't here. Right. And so nobody's going to be able to commute to any other other four-year university. So having access to that, but. So workforce development is another, and that's why we listen so closely to what businesses are moving here. What do they need? What kind of degrees do we have to be offering to meet the needs for the workforce here? And that goes to affordable housing, right? Because if somebody already lives here, goes to school, gets a job, they don't have to figure out where they're going to live.
Right.
When you have to bring an employee in from outside, and if you're not paying over $100,000, it's really hard for an employee to find a place to live.
Right.
And then with our campus development, we're trying to be a model for net zero development. So everything we're doing is to put us in a position that our entire campus will be net zero energy, water, and waste. And I don't have a date for that because we don't have the funds we would need at this point.
Right.
So the building that we're building right now will be. If we can get a partner for the solar panels, it will be a net zero building once the solar panels are on the roof.
Right.
It's being heated and cooled with geothermal, so we're bringing water from about 500 feet down in an aquifer. We're doing heat transfer, putting it right back into that aquifer, so we're not changing the demand on the water.
Right.
And then waste will probably be the hardest, right? To actually get to net zero waste, where we're recycling everything that we can recycle. Can we eventually have a way to treat black water so that can be, reused as gray water in landscaping or other, filling your toilets, whatever it is. But trying to figure out how we don't take more water other than what falls on our campus or comes into our campus, naturally. So those are our goals, and then we, all of the other things around transportation and walkability, and just trying to have as small of a footprint that as we can in terms of whether it's carbon or other impacts on our community. That we are a contributor and not being a negative for Bend or Central Oregon.
I can't think of a better place to kind of put a pin in the conversation. It sounds like I was going to ask a final question of what's the big takeaway you would like people to know about OSU Cascades? But what you just said right there sounds like the perfect.
We do have 15 acres that are set aside on our master plan for an innovation district. And it's probably not unlike what you're trying to do here in the central district. So it will be a place where a building could be built that maybe has 2 floors of university use and 2 floors of private sector use. So let's say it's a physical therapy place and we have a doctorate of physical therapy degree that's going to be starting next fall.
Okay.
And so now we have faculty, we have 10, 15 different faculty in our physical therapy program that are collaborating with the physical therapists in the private physical therapy business, and our students that have internships there, and some of them will get jobs. The faculty are maybe collaborating on research grants to do new research on new ways to address injuries or whatever it is that those are. You can make that same analogy with biosciences. We have 2 floors with chemistry in a new building, and then a firm like Grace Biolabs or some other biotech firm in Bend has another 2 floors, and we've got our professors collaborating with their research scientists on grants and contracts, and our students have internships, and so that's the vision for this 15 acres. Unfortunately, It's on top of a landfill at the moment, so until we can figure out how to get that landfill buildable, we can't progress on the. But we want housing in there, just like you want housing here, right? Affordable housing. We'd like to have childcare there so that the people who are working there have a place for their kids to be while they're working. All the things that I'm sure are being talked about with the central district as well.
Right. Wow, that all sounds fantastic. Is there any place, if people want to find out more about you or about OSU Cascades, where would you send them?
OSUCascades.edu.
.edu, yes. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, our website has all the information about what we're doing on the physical campus. You can go there. We have a webcam. You can watch it in real time.
Very exciting.
And in fact, you can even go back.
Empty campus.
They have time
lapse. Is the construction like the
Yep,
actually?
It's the construction.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
I would actually check.
I think it's about probably 15 minutes now. You can go back a year and a half and watch them dig out the pumice mine and put it all back together.
Those things are cool to me. I'm fascinated by that stuff for some reason.
You can see what all of our degree programs are. And
just OSU-Cascades.
All one word. Yeah,
okay.
.edu.
That's awesome. Becky, thank you for taking the time to come and talk with me about what's happening, and also it's been great just to kind of find out your backstory and how you ended up here and what you've been up to. I really appreciate it. That's awesome.
No, thanks for having me. It's real fun.
Thanks, Becky.
Thanks for joining us. The Call to Create with host Charlie Till is presented by Ghost Village Films and captured at Open Space Event Studios in Bend, Oregon. Subscribe and follow on YouTube, iTunes, and thecalltocreate.com.